Thank you, Mark. When many of us think of fall, we often think of leaves, well, falling, but this is also a great time to plant. I sat down with John Fesh with the UNL Extension Office to talk about why this is the perfect time to get out the shovel and start planting.
Fall is for planting, and from a horticulturist standpoint, fall is actually better because we're looking at more stable environmental conditions. You know, your meteorology people will tell us that we have more stable weather patterns in the fall. A lot of times, a lot of up and down in the spring. Moisture and the soils are colder in the spring. The rainfall is more stable in the fall. Soils are warm, so it's a good time to do the planting.
Interesting. So is it planting anything or specific things that this is the best time to plant for?
Just about anything, really.
Really?
We're talking about planting lawns, but we're also talking about planting bulbs and perennials. And it's just a really good time to get these things in the ground. The key here is we're getting the roots established now before the winter sets in. And we've got 2.5 months to get those roots established.
So eventually, I hate to say it, winter is coming. So when is the last point that you can actually put things in the ground without there being a risk of damage with the first frost?
That does vary a little bit depending on which type of thing we're planting. For example, with seed and sod, you can plant sod almost all the way up to Thanksgiving. So we've got a big window on that. The seeding really ought to be done this month here in September. When it comes to perennials, probably between now and middle of next month or so. When it goes to bulbs, we've got all the way up until Halloween or even a little after. So for most of these plants we're talking about, there's a pretty big window of opportunity.
So once it's planted in the ground, is there anything different as far as upkeep or protecting the plant?
As long as it's planted at the right depth, we're in pretty good shape. And so you'll see that on a lot of bulbs, for example. And we've got hyacinths and grape hyacinths and tulips. If you just turn the package over, you'll find the right depth at where to plant. And that's really, really important. The same is true when it comes to like New England asters. These are plants that do really well in the fall. And they are pretty, but again, you're going to want to inspect that root system to make sure it's not overly twisted. Gotcha. And this one is just starting to get that way a little bit, so you'd want to.
Down here, are you
down there,
right?
exactly.
So just a little too much root.
A little bit too much root and a little bit too coiled. So you're going to want to uncoil it just a little bit, and you just kind of rip your hands in and just pull those roots open.
So you just loosen it up. You don't. It's not like you cut part of the root or anything.
No. On plants like this, you're just going to want to rip them apart. And then once they're in the ground at the right depth, it's a matter of just soaking them in with the sprinkler hose or with the watering can and making sure those roots are settled. And then pretty much that's all you really need to do until next spring.
Fesh says a lot of people buy extra things like special fertilizer and nutrients, and he says that's not really necessary. Instead, he says it's about prepping the soil, planting at the right depth, and watering plants appropriately.